In the 5th era, year 1349, on September 9th, the end of the world began in the city of Tingen, where a woman was screaming, and it seemed that a destructive monster emerged from her. There was a person trying to fight this monster to eliminate it, but unfortunately, the monster managed to defeat this person and knocked him down. Then the monster exploded, and the end of the world occurred. But suddenly another person appeared flying in the air with strange things happening to him. It seems that the person who was fighting the monster was reincarnated in another person's body and returned to the past, to the date of June 28, 1349. This person had a wound on his head that suddenly began to heal, and we learned that this person is called Klein when a ghost called him, and Klein understood that he had come back to life again. The scene shifts to the home of 2 murdered people where investigators came to investigate. The detective said that these 2 people were Lish and Naya, and they were killed either by suicide or by practicing black magic and being sacrificed, which awakened an evil power. These 2 people had a connection to Klein. We see Klein putting on his clothes and reading a diary belonging to the real Klein, which revealed that Klein was an expert in spells and magic. Lish had brought Klein a notebook from the 4th era, and they had decoded some of this notebook. Klein began reading about all the strange things that happened and wondered if what was written was true or not. What caught his attention was that the notes for June 27 were missing. Then a note appeared in the notebook saying that on a certain date the world would end and everyone would die, which shocked Klein. But suddenly Klein drops everything when he hears his sister's voice, who has woken up, and he tries to hide everything so as not to shock her, but the gun remains visible on the desk. Klein manages to hide it at the last moment, but his sister Melissa notices something strange happening and hears the sound of the gun that Klein was trying to hide. When she asks about the source of the sound, Klein tells her it's the clock that has stopped again. His sister looks at him with contempt, goes to fix the clock, gives it to him, and leaves, making him feel foolish. After that, Klein noticed that the wound that was on his head had completely healed, and thought that perhaps he got the ability to heal when he was reincarnated. He began to wonder if what happened to Klein was suicide or murder, because Klein's memories were not clear to him yet, but he was sure that many strange things had happened and would happen because of the notebook he had. Then he remembered that he was always unlucky and failed most of the time, so he had used a luck spell before going to sleep. But his sister interrupted his thoughts when she brought him breakfast, and told him to rest in bed if he was confused because she noticed he was tired. She asked him to bring fresh bread and not leave his breakfast for long because it would spoil quickly due to the heat. Then she told him that she would bring him meat today but would be a little late coming back. This meat was a reward because Klein had been looking for a job hard lately. Klein was moved by his sister's words and said goodbye to her as she left for school. Klein was thinking that maybe his sister wouldn't find him when she returned because he decided to stay away from home so as not to put her in danger, but he hoped things would go well. Then he went to get her bread as she requested. The store owner welcomed Klein and congratulated him on his graduation, saying he was a special person and would find an excellent job soon. Klein noticed that someone was watching him from outside the store. Then Klein took the bread, thanked the lady a lot, and left. As he was walking through the city streets and observing everything, he was amazed at what he saw and felt like he was in a parallel world compared to his previous life. While walking, he was attracted by the sound of people playing cards and was surprised that they had games like the ones he used to play. Then he continued on his way and began to think about what happened to him and what kind of place he was in now. At this time, a coin fell from him, and when he tried to pick it up, he felt someone approaching him and immediately prepared his gun, but it turned out to be a clown inviting him to the circus. Klein accepted the invitation and left, but he noticed that there were people following him, so he quickened his steps to avoid them. Then he entered a tent to hide and observe the situation, but it turned out to be a fortune teller's tent, and she invited him to sit with her to know his future. Then we see the first person who was watching Klein heading towards him, but this person saw the other person and quickly left and moved away from Klein. During this, the fortune teller was insisting that Klein sit down to learn his future, and told him that since he was her first customer, it would be free. Klein actually sat down and asked the fortune teller if the card interpretation was also free. The fortune teller became nervous and said it was free, but Klein knew that nothing is free in this world. He began to shuffle the cards. The fortune teller asked him what he wanted to know, and he said he wanted to know about his past, present, and future. The fortune teller began to draw 3 cards and place them in front of Klein, telling him that the first card was for his past, the second for his present, and the third for his future. She asked him which card he wanted to reveal first, and the card was the Fool card, which is the beginning of the sequence of cards and means a new beginning. At this time, the real fortune teller came, and it turned out that the fortune teller present was a deceiver. The person who was watching Klein tried to enter the place, but Klein noticed him and quickly left. After that, Klein returned home and began preparations to perform the spell, putting everything in place. Then he went to the center of the room and began the implementation. The papers around him began to fly while he was saying the incantations, but when he finished, he found that nothing had happened and was shocked. But suddenly Klein felt a headache and heard words saying, "Don't look for trouble." Then strange things began to happen. and it seemed that the spell had succeeded as a red portal appeared around Klein, who was screaming in pain. Then he suddenly found himself floating in a strange place surrounded by strange red spots and blue spots. These spots began to wrap around Klein, but suddenly the scene shifted to a strange woman chanting incantations in the name of the Hall family. We also see a strange person holding a bottle, also casting a spell, and it seems that he felt something that shocked him. Then we see that the girl who was chanting the spell moved to the place where Klein was, along with the strange man. It seems the red spots belonged to the girl, and the blue spots belonged to the man. Then the girl asked Klein about the place they were in, and Klein was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. He even thought that he was the one who summoned the man and the girl using his spell. Then the girl asked Klein if he was the owner of this world. After the girl said these words, Klein thought about it, and then a real world began to build around them. Then Klein thought that if everything he thought about and they said actually happened, it means he can use the gray fog, and indeed he was able to use it. Klein thought that it seems he is indeed the master of this world. At this time, the man asked him, "Who are you, sir, and where are we?" Klein began to think about who he was, whether he was really Klein or Cho Mingri. Then he went and sat on the ruler's chair, and the world completed its construction. Then Klein said to the man and the girl, "You can call me the fool." The man said to him, "Master Fool, who are you and what are you going to do now, because this is considered an assault?" Then the girl said to him, "Have you finished your goal, and can we go home now?" He said to them, "Of course, if that's what you want and you ask me now, I will send you home." During this time, Klein was thinking about the identities of the man and woman because he couldn't see them clearly, and he said the girl seemed like a naive teenager while the man seemed mature and cautious. The girl was happy and said she had always dreamed of having an adventure like this and asked what she could do to become a Beyonder. Let me tell you about the meaning of Beyonders. Beyonders are people who can obtain various supernatural abilities from 22 different abilities in the Beyonder tree by taking certain doses that we will discover later and climbing the Beyonder ladder, which consists of a sequence of 9 floors. The lower the sequential number, the stronger the person becomes, meaning that number 9 is the lowest rank and number 1 is the highest rank. Then we return to Klein, who did not understand the meaning of the word Beyonders and had never heard of it before, so the fool used his intelligence and said to the girl, "The other person can answer this question for you." The other person was surprised how the fool knew that he knew the answer and told the girl, "You are from the city of Loan, and if you want to become a Beyonder, you first need to go and join the Church of the Eternal Night or some other churches. Although there are people who can never become Beyonders because they don't have the ability to do so, Beyonders do exist and fight the dangers of darkness." The girl was saying that she wanted to become a Beyonder without losing her freedom, which is what would happen if she joined the church. So he suggested that she go and join the royal family or a noble family, but she couldn't do that either, so she asked if there was another way. The man told her that there was indeed a way, and he had it because he had 2 doses of Beyonder abilities from the 9th level, one called the Sailor Potion and one called the Audience Potion, and explained to her the advantages of each. During this time, the fool was thinking, does the ability to summon these people and his use of the gray fog mean that he is indeed one of the Beyonders? Meanwhile, the girl told the fool that she had made a deal with the man and wanted him to be a witness to it, but she asked him to accept other meetings, which shocked the fool because he didn't understand either. Then the man said to him, "Sir, you have power beyond our imagination, and we appreciate you choosing us. So, let us handle the trivial matters you don't have time for." The fool thought that if he continued meeting with these people, many of his secrets would be revealed. However, dealing with this mysterious world might help him return home, so he agreed to the meeting and set a fixed time, every Monday at 3 in the afternoon. The girl was happy and suggested that she and the man use aliases since they couldn't use their real names. She proposed that since their master was using a tarot card alias, she would use one too. Her name would be Justice, and the man called himself the Hanged Man. Meanwhile, in the real world, someone was knocking on Klein's door, causing him to lose focus. The mysterious world began to collapse, but he regained control of the situation. He then announced that the meeting was over, and they each returned to their own worlds. When Klein woke up, he realized it was the police knocking on his door. He hid the gun and went to open it, shocked to see that the person knocking was a detective. When he opened the door, he was even more shocked to see that the detective was the same person who had been following him around the city. Klein said to him, "You were the one following me." The detective smiled and said, "Let's just say I was protecting you." The 2 detectives then entered Klein's house. It seemed they also had powers and were considered Beyonders, but we'll find that out as we watch. Anyway, Klein was shocked when he heard the news about Naya and Welch, that they had committed suicide. He couldn't believe it. The detective told him that at first glance, the scene indicated it was a suicide and asked if Klein had seen anything strange. Meanwhile, the other detective was reading Klein's journal and read the sentence, "Everyone will die." He asked Klein, who was too shocked to know what to say. He then sat on the bed and said he didn't remember anything. The detective told him, "Never mind that. There's evidence you visited Mr. McGovern's house on the 27th. Klein replied, "You probably won't believe me, but I don't remember anything except what's in my journal." The detective detective said, "The important thing is that Mr. McGovern is missing a gun, and I'm sure we'll find it here." Klein showed them where the gun was, and said he had woken up yesterday to find the gun next to him. He had been unconscious in a position that suggested he had tried to commit suicide, and since then, he had lost many of his memories. The detective said that what Klein was saying matched their conclusions, but even if they were sure Klein was telling the truth, they had to use their own methods to verify it. Therefore, they would send Klein to a spirit medium to look into his memories and confirm his story. The other detective then said that, in general, they were happy Klein was alive and well, because in incidents and crimes like these, all parties usually end up dead. The detectives then left, taking Klein with them. He was terrified that they would discover he was from another world, but his thoughts were interrupted by a child running away after stealing bread from a bakery, with the baker chasing him. The detective caught the boy, but the boy tried to escape and knocked a wooden plank onto the horse, pulling the detective's carriage, causing things to get tense. Klein seized the opportunity and started running until he reached a distant place. He began to walk, tired. Meanwhile, water was about to fall on him, but suddenly time stopped. Klein understood that a beyonder was nearby and tried to escape. He thought he had succeeded when he got into a carriage and told the driver to move immediately. When he was sure he was far away from the detectives, he asked the carriage driver to stop, but he didn't. It turned out the driver was one of the detectives. Suddenly, Klein woke up from his sleep, thinking it was all a dream, but the detective appeared before him again and introduced himself as Nighthawk Dunn Smith. Klein was shocked by this person's ability to manipulate his dreams. Dunn told him that they were very strong at night. Klein didn't understand why Dunn was speaking in the plural. Suddenly, the world around them began to move strangely. Then a girl appeared from behind Klein, choked him, and told him to relax, that she would be gentle with him. Then Klein lost consciousness. When he woke up, he found himself in a strange place. He saw his father and mother, but the girl interrupted him. Klein understood that this girl was the spirit medium and was seeing his memories. The medium then appeared, grabbed Klein, and asked him about the Antigonus family's notebook, but he couldn't remember. Then she asked him what he was doing on the day Welch and Naya were killed. He pulled out his gun and committed suicide. At that moment, he woke up to find the medium telling Dunn that Klein was telling the truth. As for the missing memories, they had disappeared just like Welch and Naya's souls, and she couldn't trace them. She also said she had never seen anything like it before, and told Dunn to be careful because the matter was serious. Dunn then said that since the notebook was still missing, it meant Klein was still in danger, and they weren't his bodyguards and couldn't protect him. Dunn then offered Klein a chance to join them and become a Beyonder, which shocked Klein. The next day, we see Klein walking in the street holding a card for a tavern in the city. He remembered what Dan told him about going to someone named Wright at the Hound Tavern if he wanted to join them. Klein thought that joining Dan's Nighthawks group would be a good cover for him. When he reached the tavern, he found it chaotic, filled with people betting on animal fights and men fighting each other. Klein didn't resemble these men at all. To them, he was like a baby. One of these men was about to start a fight with Klein, but Klein avoided the confrontation. Then he went to talk to Wright, who was angry, and asked Klein who sent him. When Klein said Dan sent him, Wright told him to follow. Wright put Klein in an elevator and sent him to a strange place called Blackthorn Company. Klein went to a receptionist named Roseanne, who was sleeping. When she woke up, she said she knew Klein was coming and told him to follow her. We saw a detective there too. Klein and Roseanne went down some stairs and met a quiet girl named Royal, then continued on their way. While walking, Roseanne introduced Klein to the place. They saw a strange person named Fry who was doing experiments on humans, and another person walking alone named Kenley. When they reached the captain's place, Roseanne asked Klein to go alone because she was afraid of the captain despite him being a nice person. Klein went alone and reached a huge door. When he entered, he found Dan, who gave him a document to join the 7th unit of the city. Klein was surprised by their headquarters, but Dan explained this place was just a cover for them, and that there were many similar places because they were the specialized unit dealing with supernatural matters. Dan welcomed Klein, who was very happy to join, but Dan warned Klein that he might lose control of himself. Dan asked Klein to take a candle and follow him. Klein was shocked by this. They entered a place with many graves, and Dan said these graves belonged to Nighthawks who had lost control of themselves, so they memorialized them. Dan and Klein talked about the different paths one could follow in the church: the complete insomnia path, the corpse collector path, the mysterious intruder path, and the oracle path. Klein could choose any path but needed to think carefully and consult with the alchemist, Neil, who would help him make a good decision. Klein thanked the captain and started to leave, thinking about which path to choose. When he reached the alchemist's room and opened the door, he found it empty, but suddenly there was an explosion and the alchemist appeared. Neil said he already knew about Klein because Dan had told him all the details. Neil advised Klein to take his time choosing a path and asked Klein to help organize the place, which Klein immediately did. Neil talked to Klein about his life, studies, and experience, but Klein was modest. Neil suggested he could start learning simple things and master them before moving to difficult things and decoding. Then Neil took out a notebook belonging to Emperor Roselle, which shocked Klein because most of these notebooks had disappeared. Neil said that for 150 years, no one could decode these notebooks, and legend said whoever decodes them would get supernatural power. Neil had decoded some parts and showed them to Klein, who was shocked to find they were written in Chinese, his native language from his past life. This allowed him to easily read the notebooks. Klein started thinking about the king's life and reading all the secrets, interacting with them in his mind and learning a lot. Neil didn't understand why Klein seemed distracted. When Klein tried to say he could decode some of the notebook, Neil burst out laughing, saying Klein had youthful energy and thought he could do anything, but the matter was harder than he imagined. Klein didn't tell Neil he understood the writing to avoid revealing he came from another world. Klein decided to follow the oracle path like his ancestors he learned about from the king's notebooks. Neil was shocked by this choice and told Klein that once he took the potion and followed this path, there was no turning back. Klein said he was confident in his decision, so Neil started the rituals immediately and began making the potion with strange ingredients. When finished, the potion gave off a strange explosion. Neil was shocked by its appearance and smell and doubted it was drinkable, but he teased Klein a bit, making him somewhat embarrassed. Then Neil advised Klein to drink the potion without hesitation to avoid making things worse. Klein looked at the potion, made his decision, and drank it quickly. The effect started flowing through his veins, and Klein felt strange things. Neil told him the potion's power was starting to appear, and asked him to imagine something that exists in this world. Klein succeeded in this. Then Neil asked him to imagine something that doesn't exist in this world. When Klein tried, strange things started happening, like an explosion and weather changes. Neil asked Klein to hold himself together and control himself while Klein was imagining a rocket from his old life, which was causing what was happening. Neil tried to help Klein as much as possible, and Klein managed to imagine the rocket with him standing on it flying. Then Klein fell into his thoughts, and finally imagined a spacesuit, which made the place around Neil and Klein collapse. Neil tried to calm the situation, and in the end, Klein passed the test. His eye color changed, and he became an oracle. Neil congratulated him on his success, and said he was a promising young man. Klein could see Neil's spirit, and Neil told him he could now see people's spirits and know everything about them, like their health status. But Klein was shocked when he saw two huge eyes above Neil. Neil told him not to worry, saying they might represent the weather, but Klein saw a person vanishing in the background. After what happened, Klein was exhausted. Neil advised him not to use his power too much because it exhausts his spirit and can cause him to see hallucinations. He told him that Leonard, when he first started using his power, used it too much until he fell on the stairs, so Klein should use his power cautiously. Neil told Klein how to turn his power on and off by tapping twice between his eyebrows. When Klein did this, it worked. His power stopped, and his eyes returned to normal. Then Neil gave Klein some guidance on using his power in different ways, and said they would stop at this point for today. But before leaving, Klein needed to receive his equipment, which was a gun and special bullets for killing demons. Neil told him to ask Dan for compensation. Klein went to Dan, who gave him advice and guidance, telling him that with power and distinction comes risk, so he should manage things well and not interfere in matters that don't concern him. Then, he told him his salary was £3 per week, and gave him a full month's salary in advance, £12. Klein was happy with this, and said to himself that he had finally overcome poverty. After that, we see Klein buying a cane and new clothes before starting to roam around the city. While he's walking, suddenly a carriage stops next to him, and the person inside orders him to get in. It turns out that the person inside is Leonard, who gives Klein a photo of a boy named Elliot, the son of a famous merchant, who was kidnapped that morning. They have to investigate the case, which makes Klein question if this is really their responsibility, since they're supposed to only handle Beyonders cases. Leonard explains that they're undercover in a security company right now, and that the kid's father is a regular client. Leonard tells Klein not to worry, and that it will be easy for a seer. He gives Klein the child's clothes so he can track him. Sure enough, Klein starts using his powers, and Leonard is impressed that Klein bought divination canes. When Klein activates his power, the moon turns red, and his power spreads through the canes. Klein sees everything the child did, but the weird thing is, the same eyes he'd seen before appear, following all the paths the kid had taken. Klein starts directing the carriage where the boy had gone, right and left, until they end up at a strange house on Foreststone Street. When they enter, it looks abandoned. They go upstairs, and the canes lead them straight to where the child is. At that point, Klein uses his eye power and sees the kidnappers with the boy. Leonard praises him and says, "Well done, it's over now." But Klein looks exhausted, wondering if he's overusing his power. Leonard goes to the room and breaks in with his own power. The kidnappers try to kill him, but he dodges the shot and takes out the first one instantly, then beats up the second until he takes him out too. At that moment, a strange feather appears. and both Klein and Leonard feel a black force. Klein backs away, and the kidnappers turn into a bizarre monster. Leonard gets excited and the battle begins. Leonard isn't attacking, and the monster can't touch Leonard, so it tries to get away. But Klein notices and stealthily follows to avoid being ambushed. The monster appears next to Klein, who shoots at it, shaking with fear. The monster flies up into the sky but suddenly falls due to Leonard's power. Leonard appears in his own world, tying up the monster with his power and finishing it off. Everyone is happy the boy was saved, but suddenly Klein feels something strange and sees the eyes again. When Leonard asks what's wrong, Klein says nothing. After Leonard leaves, Klein thinks to himself that the real Klein has been to this place before. They hand the boy over to his father, and Leonard starts investigating, wondering where the kidnappers got a Beyonder potion to become an uncontrollable monster like that. Leonard jokes with Klein, saying he's lucky, since it's rare for beginners to run into a monster like that. Then he says, "Anyway, I'm glad to work with you," and extends his hand for a handshake, which surprises Klein, but he shakes it anyway. Leonard tells Klein there's something that draws him to him. Klein says, "Me too." After Klein leaves, we see Leonard talking with somebody hidden in the shadows. Then we see Klein going home, really happy because he'll tell his sister he got a job. When he gets home and tries to open the door, he finds the place has changed, which shocks him. He feels a Beyonder nearby and tries to escape. He finds a door and goes in, only to see Klein's own notebook. Its pages flipping fast until it stops at the page that reads, "Everyone will die, including me." Suddenly the Fool card shows up and everything changes. Klein wakes up afraid, thinking that the house facing the kidnapping site holds a clue about the Antigonus family's diary. After that, we see someone walking around the city until reaching a particular address. When he gets there, the door opens by itself. It turns out to be Klein's house, and it seems this person is Klein's brother, Benson. He can't believe they'll live in a house like this, and he's so moved that he starts to cry. They all sit at the dinner table. Klein is cooking this time, and Klein's sister and brother are surprised at how good the food smells. His sister even asks if it's really Klein's first time cooking. When Klein's sister tastes the food, she's amazed. Benson gives Klein a gift, a fancy suit. Klein says the suit must be expensive, and his sister tells him Benson's been saving up for a while. When Klein puts on the suit, they're impressed because it fits him perfectly. Klein is happy and thanks his brother and sister, then thinks of their parents for a moment. His brother tells him, "We're family, you don't have to thank us," and they're all happy together. We see after that the person who was watching Klein being tortured by Dan managed to discover the location of the Antigonus family's journal. He figured it out from the seal on his neck, indicating he was from the secret system organization, which is responsible for leaking the Antigonus family's journals. At that point, Leonard said it was no surprise that this person was watching Klein. If the organization wanted something, they wouldn't easily let it go. So Dan decided that they needed to find the journal as quickly as possible before the secret system organization found it. Just then, Dan's assistant came and informed him that Klein had found a clue regarding the journal. We see Klein go to a place where a woman was dead and he couldn't handle it, but Commander Dan helped him and found a message from Leonard saying, "I came here to get the journal." However, while searching the place, they didn't find the journal, and they also learned that the son of the deceased person had disappeared. So Leonard took out a picture of that person and gave it to Klein, who used his staff and power to find out where that person was. When Klein started using his power, his staff began to move oddly and was about to hit him, but Dan intervened and grabbed it, saying that there was a powerful force at play that prevented them from knowing the location of Peber, the son of the deceased person. Therefore, Dan decided to request help from the Knights Templar, as there are many ways to find out where the person is. After that, they moved to a strange place, and Dan gave Klein a topaz pendulum, which helps amplify communication between spirits, and would greatly assist Klein in his mission that day. We learned that the Knights Templar allowed the use of a dangerous level 2 tool to help them find Peber, and this tool was now being brought to the city of Tingan. It is an ancient sealed artifact and one of the rare items used by the Transcenders. Some of these tools have mysterious powers, while others have destructive powers, which is why they are placed behind certain barriers in different locations. By the way, level 2 means it's a dangerous tool. Then we see that the team members arrived with the tool, and Dan introduced Klein to the rest of the Nighthawks. The first of the remaining members was Harrison, nicknamed the Nightmare, from the 7th Order, then Borgia, the Gravedigger, from the 8th Order, and finally Dolly, the Spirit Medium, from the 7th Order, who welcomed Klein. However, Harrison objected to Klein's presence on this mission because it was dangerous, and Klein's offensive ability was 0. But what was on Dan's mind was the ancient artifact, and when he realized they would use this artifact on the mission, he objected because it considered a significant risk. However, Harrison said they were looking for Peber, and there was a rumor that he belonged to the Antigonus family. If this rumor was true, they wouldn't be able to find him without a tool made by this family. Then Harrison ordered everyone to do what he does, so he could activate the tool without putting anyone in danger. However, Klein felt a burning sensation from the way way the tool was activated and didn't understand what was happening. When Harrison uncovered the tool, it was in a box and began to move, shocking Klein. When he opened the box, a small mummy in the shape of a clown came out. Klein thought it was a cute doll, but quickly things changed, and the other face of the doll appeared, controlling Klein and almost choking him, if not for Leonard's intervention. Klein started to run away from the doll in fear. Then Dan told him it seemed to be following him because he had gotten a clue about the Antigonus family's journal, since this doll reacts to everything concerning this family. We learned that this doll could control 2 or 3 people close to it, but would free itself from their control through a strong slap, just like Leonard did. Klein was still trying to escape while the doll chased him. Suddenly, the doll became very angry and started to rampage when it saw Peeber's coat. At that moment, Harrison confirmed that Peeber belonged to the Antigonus family and ordered them to start tracking him immediately. The Nighthawks team wandered around the city, performing the specific movement required by the ancient tool, and Klein felt embarrassed, but Leonard saved him, telling him he could stop now. The team then boarded vehicles to search. Next, we see a strange person using black magic to perform a spell, utilizing Peeber and the journal, with Peeber as the sacrifice. Then we see a strange person with a clown-like face saying he came late and that the journal had been absorbed, but he heard the sound of the Nighthawks vehicles and said it seemed like an opportunity to turn the situation around. When the Nighthawks team arrived at the place where Peeber was, Klein doubted the doll's ability, but Dan interrupted his thoughts and asked him to do his job. Klein began using the pendulum and said there was something very dangerous in the warehouse. The doors opened and red winds poured out, filling the area and terrifying the horses. It seemed Peeber had transformed into a rampaging beast. The Nighthawks members prepared to take out the now crazed Peeber when he saw the ancient tool. Then Dan asked Klein to take care of himself and not intervene, while the rest of the members attacked Peeber. They were all united in their attack and surrounded Peeber, almost ready to eliminate him, but unfortunately, an explosion changed the course of events and allowed Peeber to regain control. Dan realized they were not facing an ordinary beast, but a moving corpse. The Nighthawks members continued their assault, and Dolly tried to find the beast's weakness. Dan was astonished by the creature's strength and said all their attacks had become limited due to Peeber's merging with the journal. But Dolly said she found the beast's weak point and asked everyone to control the beast for 3 seconds. The rest of the team started to do this, while Dan and the others unleashed insane and strong attacks until they managed to subdue the beast. However, at that moment, everything flipped when Klein felt something strange. The journal began to glow red within Peeber's body, and suddenly a devastating attack exploded, injuring Dan and Leonard severely. Harrison tried to counter the attack, but it turned out the target was the ancient tool. Then Harrison began to attack again, and wounded the beast with his sword, but that attack wasn't enough, as the beast countered the attack and threw Harrison away. Dan tried to manage the situation with his severe injury. At that moment, Klein intervened, and finally used a tool to put the beast to sleep, successfully doing so. Dolly then seized the opportunity and executed the final attack, managing to eliminate the beast completely. After that, Dan worried about Dolly and went to check on her, starting to administer her treatment. Meanwhile, Klein heard something strange, and when he reached the source of the sound, he found a strange journal. At that moment, the person with the clown face appeared and tried to attack Klein, but Dan attacked him. It became clear he was using a shadow copy and began to flee. The Nighthawks members aimed to secure the journal and the ancient tool, and started trying to catch this person, reminding Klein that he was the same person he had seen at the circus previously. The battle between Harrison and this clown was very intense, but Harrison couldn't hit him. Even Leonard stepped in, and this clown launched an explosive attack from his face. None of the Nighthawks could hit him. Klein was amazed by this, analyzed his movements, came up with an idea, tried it, and successfully hit him. This clown decided to unleash his power and tried to attack Klein. All the Nighthawks rushed to protect him, but they realized the attacker was a clone, and the real person was standing far away targeting the ancient artifact. His plan worked, and he hit it, causing the bag to open and the doll to come out again, taking control. This time, the doll controlled everyone around. Klein tried to save himself and started thinking about using his fog charm and gold for his world. He began chanting spells until it worked. He then thought that the doll's power had increased because of the notebook. The clown's goal from the start was to release this doll to control them all. Klein also realized if he stayed too long in this world, his friends would get hurt, so he decided to use the pendulum to cast a charm and return safely to his friends. When he returned, he found the clown talking to him, wanting to make a deal. Klein would give him the Antigonus family notebooks, and in return, he'd free Klein and his friends. He told Klein to trust him and offered a gift, a way to boost his power to the 8th sequence. Klein wondered if he was telling the truth or lying and hesitated. Confused, the clown tried to trick Klein, telling him all his friends were asleep and what happened would stay a secret between them. But Leonard was aware and wanted Klein to respond quickly since time was running out. Then the clown said something that shocked Klein. We didn't hear what it was, and used a strange weapon, almost touching Klein with it. Klein grabbed the weapon, surprising the clown. Klein took advantage of the moment and attacked. Then we see that the doll's influence hadn't ended, and it took control of the clown. This allowed Klein to seize the chance and kill him with 2 shots to the neck and head. In the end, it turned out the clown belonged to the secret order. Suddenly, the clown stood again and said the name Hornassus, then died. The battle ended, and they regained control of the ancient artifact. Everyone checked on each other. Leonard told Klein he wanted to save him, but Klein had saved everyone. He whispered in Klein's ear that he was aware of everything happening, which made Klein call him a narcissist. Then, they returned the ancient weapon to its place, and the mission ended successfully. Dan told Klein he knew Klein was curious about what was in the notebook, but the Templar Knights must check it first, then they would let Klein see the contents. Dan praised Klein, saying his performance was outstanding, he saved everyone, and foiled the secret order's plan. He said he would tell the Templar Knights about Klein's merit, and that Klein would soon become a permanent employee. Klein was surprised that the person who did all this knew the notebook would unleash a dangerous power, so why didn't he do it away from Tengen? Dan told him evil planners always make bad decisions. Klein then looked at the clown's corpse, shocked he'd killed someone. Commander Dan comforted him and said the killing was necessary to save many lives, so he had to deal with it. Klein remembered what the clown said before he died, that the 8th sequence opposite the fortune teller was the clown. After that, the Nighthawks reunited to say their goodbyes. Here, Harrion admitted Klein's power, saying Klein was the first person from the 9th sequence to defeat someone from the 7th sequence, and that his performance was truly amazing. Klein said it was just luck, but Leonard started analyzing the situation, which annoyed Klein, who insisted it was only luck. Finally, Harrison said Klein was the most skilled fortune teller he had ever met, and that he had a bright future ahead, which embarrassed Klein. Klein started experiencing strange things, so Dan told him to rest. Klein reflected on everything that had happened and decided it was time to go to the university and visit his teacher. At the university, Klein talked to history teacher Eggers and asked about Hornassus. Klein told him everything about the Antigonus family notebook in the Hornassus Mountains. The teacher said he heard something similar before, which excited Klein, but the teacher disappointed him, saying it was probably just similar root words. Klein asked the teacher to let him know if he found any information, and the teacher agreed. Klein decided to leave. The teacher thanked him for his gift, but Klein said he was the one who should be thanked for years of teaching. The teacher warned him to be careful with his work, as there are forbidden areas Klein must avoid to not get unlucky. Klein said he would take that advice seriously. After Klein left, the teacher thought about their conversation. A tattoo appeared behind his ear, but it wasn't clear. Then a strange power emerged from his shadow, and it looked like he was one of the transgressors, which Klein didn't know. On a dark night, a mysterious man was torturing his servant for failing to retrieve and decipher Antigonus's family notebook. The servant had failed his master from the Aurora group and was about to face death for this insult. The servant desperately pleaded for his life, explaining that the notebook always appeared ordinary due to a protective spell, which is why he used several people as sacrifices to decipher it, but they all died, and the code remained unbroken, ending up in the hands of the Nighthawks team. Because of this, his master decided to rip out his servant's tongue and was about to end his life. The servant begged, saying that one of the sacrifices, Klein, was still alive, and through him, he could give the Aurora group what they needed. The servant was given one last chance and left alive, returning to work. He knew that failure meant being torn limb from limb before he could say a word. Meanwhile, Klein headed to the Nighthawk headquarters where old Neil taught him ritual magic to enhance his abilities as a seer. Neil warned that someone of Klein's low level would need external help to perform the rituals safely, and should never seek help from the darkness, lest he fall into the abyss. Klein watched Neil prepare the rituals, wondering if his own luck-changing rituals were black magic. Neil created magical boundaries, lit candles with spiritual energy, and began chanting. Klein waited for something epic, but his jaw dropped when the old man asked for help repaying his 30 debt. After Klein confronted him about this tedious request, Neil laughed and took him outside to demonstrate the power of magic. They found a wallet on the ground belonging to a rich person. Klein doubted Neil's intentions, but Neil assured him that ritual magic was always pure, and there was nothing suspicious about stealing from a noble. A carriage arrived with the wallet's owner, making Klein wonder how Neil would handle it. But Neil returned the wallet to its owner and received a 30 reward, shocking Klein again. Neil began lecturing Klein about trusting magic, explaining that he could use magic for anything as long as he didn't harm anyone. Afterward, Klein thought about Emperor Russell's diaries on how to become a good Beyonder by digesting the potion and acting like the chosen Beyonder class. His thoughts were interrupted by a girl named Angelica approaching with a flyer for the city's divination club. Klein seized the opportunity, thinking it would help him act like a seer. Inside, the diviner Glakos predicted Klein's future, saying he wouldn't return to his destination anytime soon, but it was possible in the long run. This gave Klein hope. When Glakos started coughing heavily, Klein tapped his forehead to see his aura asura and advised him to visit a doctor to check his lungs and eyes. Glakos asked if Klein was a doctor, but Klein revealed he was a seer. During registration, Angelica mentioned that their best diviner, Vincent, had predicted the appearance of an outstanding seer, which piqued Klein's curiosity. She told him he was late because Vincent was about to finish his mirror lecture. Then the girl led him to Vincent's class, where Klein observed from the entrance, noting that Vincent used white magic and didn't seem suspicious. As the class ended, Klein noticed Vincent giving a gift to one of the girls present. When the girl ran past Klein, he felt a terrible sensation. Ignoring his intuition and thinking he had a bad perception, Klein introduced himself to Vincent, and the two sat down to chat. Vincent read Klein's fortune and was shocked by his superior abilities, offering him some useful advice on how he could use family and social gatherings to achieve what he hoped for, which shocked Klein and made him deeply reflective. He then stood up and thanked Vincent for the information he provided, but Klein was shocked by the session's price and happy that Vincent made it free this time. After taking his leave and returning home, Klein began working on deciphering Vincent's mysterious advice and how he could use it to return to his world. He drew all possibilities of using the Grey Fog world and its inhabitants to return home, and also discussed how he could start acting like a seer to achieve his dreams in reality. Finally, he decided to direct the ritual to himself and happily drew his plan to see if it would work. Suddenly, he heard a noise at his door, burned the paper he was drafting, and went to see who it was, only to find a turtle doll made by his sister Melissa, who told Klein he had been working hard and that it was good to relax occasionally, and that this doll was meant to help him with that. However, Klein unintentionally offended Melissa when he told her she made a beautiful turtle, only for her to reveal that the doll was supposed to resemble a human, not a turtle. Klein then realized it was time to get to work, and Melissa told him to relax when he could, and invited him to her friend's birthday banquet the following Sunday. Klein remembered the words family and gathering that Vincent had mentioned, and took the opportunity to go to the banquet that weekend with his sister. Later, he conjured his own world again, and summoned the Hanged Man and Justice, using his power as a seer and seeing their true forms. Klein congratulated Audrey on her success in becoming a spectator. He then noticed that he could see their 3 unique symbols, representing their Beyonder class, along with their auras. However, their specific symbols were confusing with dual, incomplete symbolic meanings. He then allowed the two to speak freely, and Miss Justice remembered she had 3 questions she wanted to ask them. The first was the role of a spectator, and the Hanged Man decided to answer how spectators remain. Spectators forever, never in the spotlight, always in the background, observing and quiet, and that she should never lose control of herself, but focus on the meaning of the potion. He then proceeded to explain the key to embodying the potion. Klein corrected him, mentioning how acting and digestion were key, which shocked the Hanged Man when he understood this, and he thanked Klein for his clarification. Then the girl asked what would happen if an animal drank the potion because she accidentally let her dog drink some. The Hanged Man said that if the dog didn't die immediately or turn into a monster, it likely transformed into a Beyonder animal. Finally, she shouted about her father's problems and the problems of noble families and how Lion's government was failing, so Klein advised her to hold an open exam for everyone, nobles and commoners, and to get skilled people to help strengthen and stabilize the state, which surprised them, and they began thanking him. After that, he told them that his free advice was a down payment on what he wanted, and when asked about their mission, Klein told them he wanted them to collect Russell's secret diaries for him, which shocked the Hanged Man as to how Klein knew all these things in the first place. Klein also asked them to cast a luck-enhancing spell for him on Sunday, and they agreed. Then Miss Justice asked to know the spell, and when Klein told them, the Hanged Man was shocked because no one could know this spell. After hearing this spell, it led to their complete submission to Klein, and they decided to treat him with greater reverence. Then Klein ended the meeting and returned home, thinking that Sunday was his day off, so he could handle any unexpected things that might appear. From his window, he saw Benson and Melissa, and wondered if he could act like a diviner to slowly reveal to his siblings the truth that he had become a Beyonder. After they got ready, the days passed happily and peacefully, and Sunday finally arrived. The Morettis were dressed in their best clothes and heading to Melissa's friend's party. When they arrived, Klein learned that the friend's sister was Selena, the girl he had seen in Vincent's class earlier, but she didn't recognize him to the point where she called him handsome, and her sister Elizabeth worked at Vincent's headquarters too. Suddenly, he heard Alger's voice in his head performing the ritual he was tasked with, but he ignored it and entered the party. The atmosphere was lively, and Klein adapted well. When he went to get some food, Elizabeth appeared and told him not to worry because Selena didn't know his identity as a seer yet. Then his sister appeared, making him nervous. She told him she hoped he and his brother would find wives, but Elizabeth was still 16, which shocked him at her thinking. Then the girls gathered in a room, and Selena was holding the magical mirror Vincent had given her. Selena told her friends that Vincent had specially designed it so she could perform mirror magic. The girls watched as she chanted a spell and activated the magical mirror. At that very moment, Klein felt a dangerous aura emanating from the upstairs room. On the other side, we see Vincent, with an evil aura coming from him, saying, "It's time, Klein Moretti. It's time for the sacrifice." Klein started running. When he used his pendulum, he felt a terrible danger lurking nearby. When he got there, he saw the three girls using the magical mirror to see when they would marry some handsome young men. Suddenly, a monstrous girl appeared in the mirror, shocking Klein and making him realize that the situation was dangerous and he wouldn't be able to contact the team in time. Klein noticed that it would be difficult to safely remove the girls from the mirror. It was already too late for Selena, and something seemed to have affected her. Klein then remembered that he could perform a ritual, just as Neil had taught him. He began searching for the necessary supplies to perform the ritual, and noticed that they were all present in the room where the girls were. He had to be quick before bodies started dropping, but unfortunately, because of the spell and the mirror, Selena hypnotized her friends and turned into a monster, wanting to hunt Klein, who tried to rush and perform the ritual. He indeed gathered the tools and began chanting and was about to succeed in saving the situation, but Vincent used his power and gave Selena some strength. Selena stopped Klein before he could finish and started using her power. Klein tried to kill her with a gun but failed, and Selena bound him with her hair and began draining his spiritual power. Vincent then began speaking through Selena's body, angrily asking Klein everything he knew and had discovered about Antigonus's family diary. All Klein could think about was his sister, and he regretted that he would be the reason Melissa would never grow up. Just as he was about to lose hope, he heard Miss Justice performing her ritual, which gave Klein a much-needed boost of new power. He then broke free from Selena's power, at which point Vincent became enraged and decided to use his last resort, tearing off his arm as a magical offering in a desperate attempt to eliminate Klein, but it was too late. Klein used his remaining strength to complete his spell to save Selena and purify her from the evil power. In the end, he succeeded in eliminating the evil power with his bullet, which cut the connection between Selena and Vincent, and Selena returned to normal. Klein vowed to himself never to involve his family in mysterious and unknown matters again. After that, we see that Vincent tried to escape before his master could end his life, but his master appeared right at his door and crushed him like a fly. Later, Klein took Dan to the divination club and told him that Vincent was the one who gave Selena the mirror, so he might be part of the Aurora group. When they arrived there, they found Vincent's body with his arm torn off, and Klein confirmed that the spells matched those on Selena's mirror. Dan then used his magical abilities to glimpse the group's evil entity, and Dan stood face to face, shocked, before a completely bound entity with one eye. Meanwhile, Miss Justice woke up in Lyon on her birthday, and the servants had brought her clothes to prepare her. After she was ready, she was very happy and celebrated with her dog, Susie, who was her biggest shock when she learned that he could now speak like humans because he drank the potion. The events moved to the Zootland Theater, where there was a loud party and everyone was enjoying it. Then Clean appeared, seemingly there to investigate something at this community party they were looking into, and not for the party itself, as he wasn't even paying attention when people started applauding the singer. From behind her emerged the main character of the party, and everyone began greeting this person named Triss. Then Commander Dan appeared, and Clean asked him about Daly. It turned out she had gone to accompany the Antigonus family memoirs by order of headquarters to transfer them to Bakelland City. Dan didn't seem to have recovered yet from his injury in the last battle, and was saying he was lucky that after everything that happened, he didn't get infected in that battle. Then Clean began talking about the person this organization glorified, and it turned out to be an evil entity like the Twilight Entity. Clean was sad and wished Vincent hadn't died in the dream, then they would have known more information, and things would have been easier. Meanwhile, Triss was greeting the crowd before the curtain fell, and moving on to learn about the Alfalfa tragedy, when a girl approached Clean, because he had started working as a spiritual specialist. She asked about her fiancé who was on the Alfalfa ship. Clean then used his power, and it turned out the ship sank, but her fiancé managed to survive by the skin of his teeth. Dan had already been informed about this, but he needed more information to complete the search. Then we see Triss greeting his fans, and the girl who was with Clean came with her fiancé. It turned out that Triss had a hand in saving the man, but he wasn't happy when he saw that the Nighthawks were watching him. After that, the girl introduced her fiancé to Clean because he was the one who told her fiancé would return alive. Her fiancé greeted Clean and thanked him. Clean then asked him if anything was bothering him these days. Then they moved to Clean's room, and Clean used the pendulum's power on the man named Miller. Miller began explaining that ever since he survived, he's been seeing a nightmare every night, and this nightmare seems so real that Miller is terrified of it and tries not to sleep so he doesn't see it. Clean tried to calm Miller down and decided to see this nightmare himself. Indeed, Clean reached the ship Miller was on and saw someone throwing a child into the sea, then tried to jump after him, but Miller saved him. Miller actually didn't want to save this rebellious man, but he wanted to know what happened on the ship for everyone to be so violent and commit these crimes. Clean then explained to him that he now understood why this nightmare kept repeating. Perhaps this nightmare wants you to discover the truth, and it seems you noticed something but didn't see it. Then Clean noticed someone standing at the top of the ship watching what was happening, and it turned out to be Triss, who was responsible for everything. But suddenly, Clean moved to a strange place and started hearing the word Hornasis again, and a strange eye appeared again. Then he saw a chair that seemed to belong to a king or emperor. Then he woke up and was angry because this word Hornasis was haunting him, and he started wondering if it belonged to some entity or was related to his transmigration to this world. Then Dan arrived, and Clean told him that Triss was responsible for the ship tragedy. Dan was shocked, but he knew Clean was telling the truth. But this wouldn't be enough to catch Triss, because he was now considered a hero for saving some people from the ship. They needed to investigate and find tangible evidence, so Dan would do what was necessary. Then we see Triss sleeping, and someone approached him. Triss then showed his weapon, but it seemed to be a woman he knew well, and she began, "It seems fun to be in charge of this tragedy, and the survivors and their families bring you gifts." He replied, "Indeed, convincing their relatives to kill each other on the ship was fun, and I think that's how I completed the presentation preparations." She told him, "Yes, but there's another mission you have to complete in Tinjin City, because the person I was collaborating with drew the attention of the Nighthawks to himself, and you have to do it yourself. Here's your payment for the mission in advance." And she gave him a recipe for Sequence 7 potion which was titled The Witch. Then we moved to Clean, who was with Mr. Neil, looking for talismans for Clean to give to his siblings, but Neil led them to a liquor store, which surprised Clean. Neil told him to trust him. Then they arrived at a place with a strange wall, and Neil knocked on it in a specific way, so the wall opened strangely, and an elevator appeared. They rode it down to a place called Tingan Lower Market. Clean was impressed by this market, and Neil explained to him that all kinds of products for all types of people, like mages, beyonders, and punishers, could be obtained from here. Then Clean felt something strange and looked and found a strange person, noticing that this person had high spiritual perception. This man approached Clean and told him, "You smell of death." Then strange things started happening to this man, and he fell to the ground. Neil explained to him that this man was born this way, and his nickname was The Beast, so don't mind him. Then they continued their way until they reached their destination for talismans. Clean then used his power and saw that the talismans were very weak, so Neil told him that they weren't beyonders, so they couldn't make real talismans. He advised him to buy some of these incomplete talismans and improve them in his own way, but Clean was sad because the talismans were incomplete and expensive. Neil tried to console him. Then Clean noticed a strange stone, and the seller told him that this was Emperor Rosel's blade and carried mystic power and would help him avoid disasters. But Klein was not convinced and was about to buy the talismans, but he saw Triss and decided to pursue him. While pursuing him, he noticed that another person was pursuing him, and Neil explained to him that he was an informant working for the Punishers. When Triss noticed this, he tried to escape, and the informant started firing. Someone was about to die, but Clean saved him. During the chase, Triss was very fast, but he couldn't avoid things and was shot in the arm, but he continued to escape despite this. Then we see that Clean and Neil went to the roof to try to catch Triss, but they met Commander Dan, with murdered informants next to him, killed by Triss before he escaped. Dan asked Clean to come with him because they needed him to search for Triss. Then they got into the carriage, and Clean asked if they had found any evidence confirming Triss's crime. Dan told him that the Punishers had found something, which was Triss's connection to some murder cases in neighboring cities, and we have information that he is a Beyonder with the title Instigator from Sequence 8, which is a path for assassins. Then, while Clean was using his power, Clean reached Triss and began directing them. Dan then told him that instigators belonged to the demon sex, and it seemed that Triss had other goals in Tingen. Clean was surprised by Dan's words, so Dan told him that the demon sect is a group that pledges allegiance to ancient demons, and most of the sect are women. Indeed, they reached the place where Triss was, and Dan noticed some blood at the entrance and asked Clean to stay put and not enter with them. Klein was standing outside, worried about Trez because his next dose for Sequence 7 was only suitable for females. At that moment, people in the building started to leave due to the Nighthawks, and a girl accidentally bumped into Klein, but it seems she had some suspicions. Klein tried to help her, but she told him she was fine and just felt a little dizzy. Klein then used his power and seemed to notice something, but Dan interrupted his thoughts and pointed out that they hadn't found Trez. After these events, Trez disappeared without a trace, and they put up a wanted poster for him and continued searching for days days without success. Because of this, the operation was halted, and things were quiet for a while. Klein was promoted to a full-time worker, earning £6 a week, which made him very happy. He also practiced his hobby as a fortune teller in his spare time to digest his dose well. In the tarot group, it seemed that the position of the hanged man had slightly shifted towards the fool after using the 3 honorable names, and the talismans had also been successfully completed. However, Klein's sister was puzzled because she didn't believe Klein when he told her that the prices of the talismans were cheap. Klein continued his combat training and mystical affairs, and he was very exhausted. Things remained calm for a while until the fateful day when Leonard knocked on Klein's door to summon him for a new mission. It seemed something suspicious was happening in the city of Tingen, as the death rate had increased 5-fold, but oddly enough, all the deaths appeared to be natural. Therefore, the matter was assigned to the Nighthawks. The Nighthawks began collecting evidence amid the ongoing tragic deaths, to the extent that a businessman set the workplace on fire to take revenge on the employees. There was something common among the deceased. They were mostly sick or homeless, and they were all on the verge of dying anyway. Klein felt sad for one of the women and gave her daughter some money, because this family's situation resembled his own. If it weren't for his brother's hard work, Klein wouldn't be here today. Klein used his ability to see what had happened, and realized that a woman touched the deceased lady's back in a strange way a little before her death. Apparently, the Nighthawks had indeed found the hand of a young woman in most of the deaths. We see someone messing with dolls, and it seems there is black magic at play. On the other hand, Dan was convinced that Trez was involved in this matter, and suspected he was cooperating with this woman, since the devil cult was mostly comprised of women. Klein was thinking about something, and it looked like Leonard had figured this out too. Then Leonard asked him to say what he and Klein had. Klein began explaining his theory that all the deceased, regardless of whether someone was responsible for their deaths, were basically on the verge of dying, but their lives were forcibly taken by someone, almost as if being offered as a sacrifice to summon evil demons or to perform a wide-scale curse. This seemed to be the reason for the presence of the devil cult in Tingen. Everyone agreed with this theory, and Leonard began to flatter Klein, saying he was happy they had come to a conclusion together. It seemed they were the main heroes, and Klein was surprised Leonard referred to himself as a main hero, which made Klein question him about why he said this. Leonard told him everyone has their own secrets, but as long as you, Klein, don't threaten the Nighthawks, you'll stay my colleague. At that point, Dan was sure that what was happening was a ritual for something bad, so they had to find the location of this ritual quickly. Leonard gave Klein an item belonging to one of the deceased to track him down. Klein began using his power until he reached a place that left him shocked. The team headed there, but there was interference with Klein's power, preventing him from clearly seeing the location and getting there. So they narrowed down the search area after thinking it over and deduced the expected place for the next target. They indeed reached the location, and Dan praised Klein's abilities, then explained to him that they would use the nightmare ability so Leonard and his team could attack. They started executing the plan, and there was a girl in the house who felt something strange. However, when she looked out the window, she saw nothing. At that point, she took out some powder from her bag, cast a spell of invisibility, and went out to explore the area until she found one of the Nighthawks members and eliminated him. Once the member disappeared, she realized she was in a nightmare. Leonard took advantage of the opportunity and started attacking, managing to hit the girl and throw her away. Dan was about to catch her, but she cast a spell and escaped the nightmare, and a real battle started between her and the Nighthawks. Klein noticed that the girl had come out of Dan's nightmare, so he asked Dan not to approach the house no matter what happened, and if he faced any danger, he should retreat. Klein was shocked that the members of the Nighthawks from Sequence 8 were unable to eliminate this girl. When Leonard hit her, it became clear she was using a swap spell and transformed her body into parts heading towards Leonard to kill him. But Dan intervened just in time, and it turned out the girl had been watching everything happening from behind the window. Then she left her room and went to the dolls area to start casting a ritual to summon a chaos demon. The situation was unstable and began to get more dangerous, and there was a fierce battle taking place. It seemed Dan was injured, but he freed himself from the injury and entered the house, yet there were directed attacks towards him as well. Then he saw the ancient demon attacking him, so he unleashed his power, but unfortunately that worsened his illness to the point of spitting blood. The girl escaped outside and managed to hit Leonard with a thorn, then disappeared, leaving the thorn stained with Leonard's blood. Leonard tried to chase her, but to no avail. Then we see the girl use the thorn to curse Leonard with black magic. Leonard then pulled hair from his head and a nail from his hand and cast a spell to escape what was happening. Indeed, the girl thought she had killed Leonard, but he survived. Meanwhile, Klein was using his power to see the girl and remembered she was the girl who fell in front of him while they were chasing Trez. What surprised Klein was that the girl looked a lot like Trez, which made Leonard say this girl is Trez. The other members were amazed and asked why Trez was disguising herself as a woman. Klein explained that Trez had transformed into a woman and wasn't in disguise, which explained his disappearance. Dan was shocked, but the conclusion made sense since all the members of this cult were women. The bigger shock was that Dan found out all the women in this cult had been high-ranking men who transformed into women. Later, we see Trez boarding a train, and everyone is staring at her because she now looks like a beautiful woman. Even when she decided to light a cigarette, many men appeared wanting to help her,